So this actually happened to what seemed to be be a friend of mine who happened to be an Uber driver at the time of the story. This was took place sometime in the winter of 2018. This Uber driver that I have known, well, I didn't use Uber for anything, but this Uber driver happened to be a close friend of mine. A friend of mine knew this person, and he used to be an Uber driver back in 2018. It was a summer of late 28. It was in the winter of late 2018. My friend's friend, which we'll call him by the name Ivan, happened to be an Uber driver at the time of this story. His job was to mainly take people to and from places. Most of the time, the places he went to were pretty solid and very, very understandable, and even in very valid locations, whether it be to restaurants, to malls, hospitals, etc. He had done mainly night shifts as, due to his financial reasons, he had to get a second job as he, along with his family, were kind of behind on bills and mortgage. So, with that said, Ivan had to get a second source of income. He started working as an Uber driver, and since then, the pay was pretty good for the most part. However, though, there was something that went really messed up. Ivan was driving a few times, but however, he got a really unsuspecting call. It wasn't really a call, but it was like a request from Uber. Now, he basically dropped off his last passenger off for the day and made sure they have their belongings. And as he was driving up, he got a request that someone wanted an Uber. Ivan actually looked down and saw that it came from a house and a street that he wasn't familiar with. Keep in mind, he was pretty confused as to why this person did a Uber, but I guess maybe he thought he could just do one more ride and then that'd be it. Ivan replied saying that he'd be there. Ivan drove over to what seemed to be a very isolated area somewhere outside of the town. As he drove up, he could realize that the house looked really run down. It looked like it hadn't been used in years, as everything looked very abandoned. Ivan then stood out there and texted the person saying he was out there, but got no response. Ivan thought that maybe it was just some prankster just trying to get him coming over there for nothing, which unfortunately that has happened to him a few times. He ended up calling to see if the person would pick up. There was no answer on the other side, so he ended up calling again, but there was still no answer. Not long after that, Ivan looked up to see that there was at least 2 or 3 figures standing outside of the front of the house. They looked like they had some weapons such as a crowbar, a baseball bat, and an axe. Ivan realized that this person probably was just trying to lead them away from the area, from his vehicle to this house, and they were the ones who had requested a ride. Ivan drove all the way back to his town and ended up reporting the number to the police, but when the police investigated the house, they saw that no one had been in there for years, as the house was pretty much run down and was never been used. Still to this day, though, Ivan still does his Uber driving, but he never suspected anything like this ever happening again. And this is a very risky situation. If he stayed there any longer, God knows what would have happened to him if he didn't get out of there sooner. So this actually is a story that is told in perspective of one of my friends from high school. I'm going to keep his name anonymous, but this is told in the perspective of a male. Now, apparently he used to go to this one Waffle House area, and there was this area that had a Waffle House which was located. He told me that this happened some time ago when he was visiting in the US, and the location of this Waffle House was located, I believe, in Pennsylvania. Since this Waffle House he was at he used to love going there for their food. But however though, since he had this little contract where he was going to be in the US for a few years, he ended up having to get a job at the Waffle House as his parents were moving in with his grandparents. Now keep in mind that this took place sometime in 2016, so it was before he came to Canada. However, he was around maybe 16 at the time, and he was working at Waffle House on the night shift. It was something that he wasn't really a fan of, but he really didn't mind it. He usually get Uber drivers to and from places, so he was waiting for his Uber driver to pick him up one day, so he was sitting out there waiting for his Uber driver. However, there was a very suspicious vehicle he didn't even recognize stopped not far from the Waffle House. And out step in front was a man. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and he said that he was his Uber driver. Unfortunately, he didn't really know that he wasn't an Uber driver, and that was someone he didn't talk to on the phone. He ended up saying that he didn't know him, and now he was waiting for his real Uber driver. Just then, this man ran over and tried to force my friend into the vehicle, but luckily, his real Uber driver showed up, and this man honestly ran to the vehicle and drove off. Unfortunately, my friend was able to get back safely, but he ended up not working the night shift after that. After he told his parents about this, they tried to get the cops involved and a report was made, but unfortunately they had no idea if this man was even caught. I am not sure, and he's not sure, why this man pretended to be an Uber driver, but he probably did it just to kidnap some people. I don't know if this man ever got away or if he's in jail, but my guess is he's probably out there somewhere. Now, this story may not be as long, but this is something that happened to one of my teachers in elementary school. Now, she told me about this experience that happened to her in late 2017. Her name was Kat, and she was actually an Uber driver for while she was a teacher. She does Uber driving usually on the weekends, and most of the time she would do it after school. She mainly never had really weird experiences or any weird encounters, but one of these nights while as an Uber driver, it was something she would never forget. It was sometime at the night when she was finished dropping off someone else and ended up going to head home when she ended up looking over to see that there was a man on the middle of the road. She honestly had no idea what he was doing or anything and seemed to be standing there. Honestly, Kat ended up honking her horn asking the guy to move out of the way, but he clearly did not comply. He unfortunately was just standing there and staring. She didn't even know what he was doing or why he was standing in the middle of the road, so she ended up getting closer and honked again. Just as she got closer, the guy can see the headlights, and he looked as if a deer was looking in the headlights. This man unfortunately took off running, and Kat ended up getting off the car to think maybe somebody could have dropped something. He looked to see that there was a huge knife. Whatever this man was probably planning to murder someone. She took this in and reported to the authorities, but they had no idea if this man was ever caught or not. Unfortunately, this never happened again since, but there was no follow-up regarding if this man was ever found or if he had any plans to use his weapon on her or not. So, this actually happened to one of my friends back in 2017. I can't really remember what month it was, but it was sometime in late spring, early summer. Now, a friend of mine of this story used to live in Toronto at the time of this story. Her name was Beth, and she was around her mid-20s. Beth was pretty much just usually doing her own thing. While she lived with her boyfriend at the time of the story, she was pretty much a night owl, but she was mostly up till like around 1 or 2, mainly because she liked being up early. Of course, she did work from home, to which she would just go to work at home whenever. However, her boyfriend did work out pretty late at night, so he didn't get home till around 3 or 4. He had his own keys with him, so he had a way to get in case if Mary Beth was asleep. Well, of course, Beth, or Mary Beth at the time, was usually doing her own thing when it came to at-home online work. Now, she mostly would be up late if she didn't have work, but if she had work online, she would just have to get up early to do it, or whatever that may be. However, one of the nights, though, was something not very weird, but really something she never expected. There was this guy who came up to the front door. She thought that maybe it was her boyfriend, but when she went up, it was actually someone that she never expected. Apparently, it was someone she had no idea who he was, but she didn't see him before. He ended up saying that if he was her Uber driver. Honestly, she wasn't. But it sounded like he was an Uber driver, and he said if Mary Beth ordered an Uber driver. Mary Beth didn't order an Uber driver, so she politely declined, telling him that she didn't order one and to have a nice night. However, though, that was the one night. The next night, however, she ended up was playing on her computer when the door knocked. She ended up going over and asking who the person was. It was the same guy claiming to be her Uber driver, to which she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't order an Uber driver." This was getting really confusing. Why would this person, being an Uber driver, assume that Mary Beth ordered one if she didn't order one? She knew for a fact that she didn't order an Uber driver and thought that maybe this guy was drunk, but had no idea why this guy kept coming over to her house, claiming that he's an Uber driver. Of course, the next night, however, he ended up going over to her house saying she ordered an Uber driver. Mary Beth finally had it. "Look, I did not order a freaking Uber driver, okay? Now leave me alone, you bastard, or I will call the cops." As Mary Beth said that, she slammed the door and locked it, and then the guy took off running to his vehicle and sped off. She obviously had no idea why he was like that, but when her boyfriend came home, Mary Beth told her boyfriend about the whole ordeal with this guy claiming to be her Uber driver when she never even asked him to be the Uber driver. And the weirdest thing was that she never ordered an Uber driver. So this was really something. Of course, Mary Beth's boyfriend ended up deciding to file a report to the police, and Mary Beth ended up explaining the best details she could of what this guy looked like. Eventually, this guy never came back, and he had left her alone. However, one night, though, she was making supper when she ended up hearing a knock on the door again. She goes over, because since she was frustrated, she went over to think that maybe her husband was home. Well, her boyfriend, that she was calling her husband. When she opened the door, it was the same guy who claimed to be the Uber driver. She ended up telling him to get off the property, and then he ended up open fire and try to hit her with his gun by opening fire at her house. Mary Beth officially stabbed him with a knife that she kept and ended up knocking him down. The cops arrived and arrested him, and it turns out that he was not an Uber driver. He was going to people's houses making claims saying that he was an Uber driver when people didn't order an Uber driver. Officially, this was his way of trying to lure unsuspecting people into his house, his car, and drive them over to his house where he would do God knows what. He had been arrested, and there was nothing that happened like that ever since then. However, though, Mary Beth had no idea why this guy even tried to make an attempt to break into her house, and even then try to get her to say that he was her Uber. She never seen him again, and she's glad that she's never seen him ever since marrying her boyfriend. She has at least 2 kids now, and she had no idea about who this guy was or what he wanted. But she's just glad that her boyfriend called the cops. Things could have been a lot worse if she didn't answer the door. What could have happened if she got in the car with him? That is something we will never know.